Pastor Ben. I'd like to welcome you to Faith Baptist Church's Sunday Bible study. Today I'm going to be talking about tilling up ministry. We're in the middle of the COVID-19 thing still here. It's July 2020. All of us have been dealing with this thing to some degree, and it's impacting everybody's lives all over the world. This is a worldwide thing, so it's impacting everybody to some degree. But what I've seen is there's some people out there that have been commenting about the churches and how churches have been closed, not allowed to pray and stuff like that. So I want to step back for a moment from what the world is telling us, what the world's mandates are and dictates, because the world doesn't have anything to do with the church. Okay? The church is here by God's design, by God's plan. And therefore, He is the one who will ultimately decide what happens with the church on a global scale and a minor scale, which is, our little church here in Aner, or your church wherever you're attending. So I want to talk to you today about ministry and what happens when God is dealing with it. And the example I want to use, the analogy, so to speak, is of farming. Some of you farmers out there, you guys who grow big gardens and stuff, you're going to know pretty much more than I know probably. But basically what I want to do is I want to examine it as in light of a church being the garden. So here's what happens. Let's go to the Bible here for a couple passages. The first one I want to go to is in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 6 to 9. And here's what Paul's saying to the church. I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the increase. So that neither he who plants is anything, nor he who waters, but God who gives the increase. Now he who plants and he who waters are one, and each one will receive his own reward according to his own labor. So he's talking about being a part of the growth process of a garden. God is ultimately the one who gives the increase. Another passage I want to take you to, because we're going to use these two just as simple examples to talk about this through this Bible study, is in Hebrews chapter 6, verse 8. In Hebrews chapter 6, he says, but talking about a field and fruit and things like that, he's saying, if it bears thorns and briars, it is rejected and near to being cursed, whose end is to be burned. So here's what happens. Let's relate the church to a piece of ground. If that piece of ground is coming to the place where it's only bringing out thorns, it's not really bringing out anything but thistles and stuff like that, stuff that's not edible, okay, stuff that's not bringing nourishment to your body, then the field needs to be reclaimed for that purpose of farming. What he's saying here is burn it over. And farmers who deal with this sometimes have had to burn over fields. Burning over a field causes everything that's on it to be destroyed. And then comes the tilling process. The tilling process takes everything that's on and turns it over, turns it under. After the tilling process, there's a dormant period of time where the field is prepared and then the seeds are planted. After the seeds are planted, there's a time where the process calls for cultivation. Cultivation can be if you're in if you've got a small garden, you're down there with your hands, you're in the dirt, you're loosening up the dirt, you're getting the stuff right. You may even be putting down manure, trying to get more nourishments into the ground if that's the case, okay? And it's needed. There's watering that happens the entire time. You may be out there watering your garden. God may be watering the garden for you. Someone else might come and water the garden in your absence. It's okay. Some plant, some water. That's what Paul says right there. If the field isn't any good, burn it over, you start over again. Finally, after we see that water process, we see the growth coming up out of the ground, then there's a pruning process. So pruning is taking the plant and making it to be as efficient and effective in its growth as possibly can be done. And people who, take care of tomato plants and stuff like that, there's a way to make that plant to be very large and strong and put off a lot of fruit. Finally, after the growth time, you run into a period of harvest. The harvest brings forth fruit, and the plants can bring forth fruit for long periods of time. How does that relate to ministry? Ministry relates like this. Sometimes we get to a place where the field isn't producing anything. And unfortunately, sometimes you get stagnant and the field just kind of dries over. There's no real, you can have rain, but it's not really doing anything for the ground. Maybe there's no plant seeds. Maybe the only seeds that are there are some thistle, thorn, stuff that's itching you, hurting you, hard to walk through. Ministry can turn out like that sometimes. The nice thing about it is God is not there to say that ground is worthless. That's what I'm getting to today. The ground is not worthless. The ground is, there's still value in it. So one thing God ain't making any more of, as a realtor would say. So the ground has to be brought back to a place where it can be good again. Sometimes our ministries are like that. We need God to reinvigorate us in our ministries. Sometimes the ministries have to be tilled under. And I'm telling you, I've seen God, I've been a part of it where God just tills a building and everything, just till it all on the ground. Start it all over again. Till it all under, get it all ready, plant some new seeds. Very difficult to go through this. And right now, if your church is in that place where you're struggling and the doors are closed and there's hardly anybody there, or there's people and you can't come in because everybody got to take a number, you got to call in reservations, and there are churches in both scenarios. That doesn't mean that God is done with it. Sometimes we have to take the ministry, the design, everything we've put together, and we have to start all over. Sometimes we have to just deal with the circumstances the world has, because we are in the world, but we're not of the world. And sometimes tilling under a garden that maybe is making tomatoes, maybe now it's time to start making pumpkins. Maybe now is the time to start making cucumbers. Maybe now is the time to plant corn. God's the one who gives the increase. God's the one in the end who decides what the ministries are. I want to encourage you today, friend, that just because you see your garden producing very little, or you see all these problems in the garden, or the foxes are coming in there chewing all over your vines, and there's undercurrents going on, don't lose heart. It happens. It's a garden. There's a lot going on. It's okay. Remember this. You're a part of the gardening process with God. And that in and of itself is a great, wonderful thing to be. A part of something with God. The creator of the entire world has you, has me, working together with him to build his kingdom. There's no greater honor as far as I'm concerned than that. So friend, you are in a very good position. Just keep in mind that sometimes it may have to be tilled under. Sometimes you may have to be dumping a bunch of manure on it. Sometimes you may have to get down there on your hands and knees with your hands in the ground, and it's not very good work sometimes. Dealing with mud, rocks, thorns, and thistles, and manure doesn't sound fun. But in the end, the reward is much. Friend, God bless you. Hope this time was good for you. Study the Word. Don't quit. Keep studying the Word. God will bring us all through this. God bless you all.